Good morning. Today we're going to, in week 3, talk about the PHP install. My name's Charles William Marshall. That's my email address and cell phone. Use a cell phone during office hours, and the preferred method to set up an appointment or do a web GoToMeeting is to use the email address. All right, this is for CIT253. It's a 3-hour credit. The title is Data Driven Web Pages, and as always, Blackboard's the official way to see assignments, turn in assignments, but there is supplemental information at that web address. All right, so today we want to install PHP on your Windows 10 Apache server. Read your laptop or desktop. When PHP is installed, we want you to stop, because the next step is going to be to put MySQL in, but we're not going to do that till next week. So from your Windows 10 computer, go back to this web link. You used it yesterday or last week to put in Apache. This week we're going to use it to put in the PHP. I'm not going to read that to you because you've got access to the PowerPoint and you can just copy and paste. All right, in week 2 you stopped, as I said, by installing Apache. Now we're going to do the steps to install PHP, but stop when you get to the MySQL section. Okay, so we're jumping in with both feet. I think many of you have already had PHP and been exposed to it in programming, but if you need a really good PHP tutorial, I recommend www.w3schools.com. And again, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but if all else fails, Google for PHP tutorial. They have a good one. All right, so what's the basic syntax? It starts with a greater than symbol, or less than, rather, a less than symbol with a question mark, PHP, and it ends with the question mark and the symbol. All right, so there's an example of it, and the default extension is PHP. We're going to show you how you can change those or make it multiples, but just out of the box, people expect you to have it in .php. I've seen places where people would do PHP 3 or PHP 4, trying to tell what version it runs in. That seemed like a good idea the day you do it, but you very quickly, the next time you go through a conversion, wish you'd just left everything PHP. A PHP file normally contains HTML and some PHP scripting code. It can also contain cascading style sheets, JavaScript. Anything that's legal in an HTML file is legal in PHP, plus you get to have the power of the PHP scripting. All right. It's another way to generate a hello world page. There's the total file. So we did tell it what type of HTML, what type of XML it's going to see, that it's HTML. We're getting to the body. Heading 1, we're going to have the my first PHP. We're going to end the heading 1. And now we get to the PHP where we say, okay, we're going to echo whatever's in the quotes. Notice the semicolon. PHP always ends with a semicolon. Then we're in the PHP block, in the body block, and in the HTML. PHP always end with a semicolon, and I have spent days looking for the semicolon. Well, not days, but remember to put your semicolons, or the code will not do what you think it's going to do. The page does no more than a pure HTML page would do, because all we did was write the word hello world, but you can make it do so much more. Let's ask the server to do something a static page cannot do. All right, display the current Zulu time. Well, let's start with what is Zulu time. Zulu time is the same as Greenwich Mean Standard Time, or GMT. Near London, there is a Royal Observatory in Greenwich, England, and when England ruled the waves and people were trying to learn how to navigate, they spent a lot of time, and the world got used to using Greenwich Mean Time. With computers, it's called Zulu time. It's also called UTC time, or Coordinated Universal Time. So if you're interested, I could talk days on time and time zones and so forth, but as you start working with the internet where you're moving across continents, you've got to figure out some one time zone to base everything off of, and currently the world's working on GMT, Zulu, or UTC time. Alright, so Zulu is a fixed time zone, and it never observes daylight savings time, which, if you don't, time zones are something, but when you start having time zones changed to daylight saving at a different time, it really gets to be fun. The difference between Maysville, Kentucky and Pforzheim, Germany is usually 6 hours, except when we go to daylight saving time before they do, or they come off of daylight saving before we do. So Zulu and having a fixed time zone is an important thing. Alright, so right now with Eastern Daylight Time, Maysville, Kentucky is offset by -4 hours from Zulu time zone. When we go to daylight Eastern Standard Time, we'll be 5 hours off. Alright, so let's alter the PHP code to do what we just asked to do. In the PHP, we added echo this function, and then this is the format we want it to come out in. And so the GM date has where you put in the format and you put in the timestamp. Alright, if you want to see more information on that, here's 3 different places you can go to learn about using Zulu time in PHP. Alright, so we're going to use Notepad on your Windows computer, and we're going to put the code that we just looked at into a file, and we're going to call it phpprog1.php, and we're going to save it in your root directory of your server where it's dishing the web pages. And so when we reference it, we're going to say localhost, because we're never leaving your machine, phpRogue1.php, and lo and behold, there it goes. And notice that it's 8:12 p.m. or 18 when I wrote this, when I took this screenshot. And to prove to you that in fact it is doing something, when I refreshed the page just a little bit later, it was 8:24. So that proves that in fact we are really moving forward in time, and it is dynamic. Alright, so how does that work? Well, if we pass a web page with no data in the page request, so we enter a URL into the address bar of the browser. The request goes across the network serving that domain. The web server, in our case Apache, reads the URL to the right of the domain. So ours was localhost/phpprog1. So it would have stripped off the local host and said, okay, now I'm going to take everything below and look below document root to see if I've got something. And you define where document root is in the httpd.conf file that we talked about last week. And so local root on my Windows machine is on the C drive under Apache 24 under HTT docs. And so when we look, we in fact do have a we do in fact have a hello.html, which is what I asked for. and so it gives us back. So notice on the PC it's C Apache HTT docs, and all the web server did was go to the web root and look for that file, and it works. Now, if we look at the JavaScript file that we wrote last week, the same thing happens. Localhost KentuckyAdjoin.html, or that's the one I wrote. Yours is but in Iowa probably. And there is the part of the source code, and there's where it's working. So the Apache is picking up a file. We're not passing any data to it, and that's how it's working. Okay. But if the file does not exist, it's going to check in the directory index variable. And here's where I set the directory index. And I said, okay, if somebody just asked for a directory, then check to see if there's an index.php available. And in fact, there is an index.php. So when I just said localhost, it went to its web root, C Apache HT docs, and it found it. And it in fact turned back index.php. And there's what it was, just to prove to you. Okay. But Apache uses file extensions to decide how to handle a web address. Apache handlers defined in the httpd.conf file control one's particular site and manages how each file is handled. So Apache's using what's called CGIs, or Common Gateway Interface Scripts, and server parsed files. Some of those are Perl. There's lots of them, but one of them is PHP. In ours, we set a PHP indirect equal to C/PHP. That's where we installed just now the PHP interpreter. We added a handler that said if you see a .php, use this. And we told it to load the module PHP 7 module, which you could find here. So when we run localhost PHP prog 1, lo and behold, there is one where it's going to look, and because it has the PHP behind it, it's going to know to run the PHP interpreter and in fact tell us what time it is now. And there's the source code that we just used before. But note what happens when the same content but has an HTML extension. So all I did was save as this PHP program as an HTML program. And notice it doesn't do anything. I mean, it just takes it as a comment because it doesn't do anything with that PHP. Okay, so we've talked about how the server, Apache, decides what to do and how to handle files. How does the browser? Well, the browser has MIME types to decide how to handle a file. And MIME stands for Multi-Purpose Internet Mail Extension. So all this technology was really developed first for email, which was really one of the very first big uses of the internet, and is just carried over to the browser. So Apache MIME types are used to tell the browser how to handle the types of the files it's going to send back to it. And that's basically the intro. will tell you that this week's assignment questions are going to include material covered in the W3 Schools PHP tutorial. I'm going to include questions from where PHP comments start down through the super globals. So I think you may in fact know all of this and can just go straight to the scripts. But if not, you need to work through these. Don't think it'll take very long, and it has the advantage you can test your code and see it right there, which is really a powerful way to learn. And don't try to memorize any of these syntaxes. What you're trying to learn is concepts. It's too easy to Google for something to find out exactly what the syntax is. What you're trying to learn now is concepts. All right. So there's one more video for this week, and it's going to talk about how to move data with page requests to the server. But it looks like this in your code, and the difference is going to be simply whether you say method post or method get. And it makes a difference, and the other video is going to tell you why. So, that's the end of the PHP install video for CIT253, which is a 3-credit-hour course. If you have questions, I'm sure that I may have said something in an unclear way, and for that I apologize. I need your help to help clarify it, so if you have a question, either send me an email here. If it's a real emergency, call me during office hours at this number, but it works best to send an email here and we can set up a GoToMeeting. This week's going to be like every other week. Be sure and remember that we need to have a 15-minute GoToMeeting, even if you don't have questions, just so that I can kind of touch base and see how you're getting along, and see how your local web server is behaving. And thank you.